What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Happy Friday. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato, DraftKings studio in Boston. Fun show for everybody today to finish off the week. As always, download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. And check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings network. You can also catch the best of GoJo and Golic noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. Claudia, what do we got coming up today?
Well, GoJo, I just have to say, we'll talk about Cavs Celtics. I just went through my DMs on Instagram. People stop DMing me. They're like, oh, Celtics lost. Tatum sucks. First of all, I'm not coaching the team. Second of all, I'm not surprised. We will get to that. But first, bad blood. Former Eagles dish on Chip Kelly's Philly tenure. Skenes on the scene. Excited for that one. Tim Kurkjian will join us to discuss the Pirates' phenom MLB debut in pivotal Game 3s. Knicks and T-Wolves look to take a 3-0 lead. And yes, I went to the game last night, people. Okay, and It seems like every time I go to games, they lose. Honestly, I can't tell you the last time I went where the Celtics won a game. And that's okay, but that's not my fault. Okay, when you lose by 24, it usually has something to do with the players and has something to do with the coaching, and I think both of those came into play for Game 2. 118-94. Mitchell scored 29. Evan Mobley, 21, 10 rebounds, 60 points in the paint. They did whatever they want. Karis LeVert, 21 off the bench. According to ESPN Stats and Info, the 24-point win, the biggest in playoffs since 1991 for a double-digit underdog. The Celtics were 13.5-point favorites. Okay, keep that in mind moving forward in these series. So Tatum, how are we feeling after that one?
Nobody was in there defeated or deflated. I mean, you never want to lose, especially in the playoffs. A lot of things we can learn from, and we get it, right? The world thinks we're never supposed to lose. We're supposed to win every game by 25. And it's not going to be like that all the time. So, we don't expect it to be easy. It's a good team we playing. It's the second round of the playoffs. So it's just gonna be fun the rest of the series, and especially come Saturday. But, we've bounced back plenty of times. We lost, 16 games this year? So I would like to think that we respond pretty well the few times that we did lose.
So he's
Man,
not.
listen, the only person passing the buck more this morning than Claudia is Jason Tatum, apparently. Trying to duck responsibility, both of you guys.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, he's not wrong, right? Like, they're not expected, or they're not supposed to win every game by 24. It is the playoffs. I understand that. But complacency comes to mind. When you raise the expectations so high, as the league did for the Celtics, and you meet those expectations in the regular season, you become complacent. So you're okay with giving up a game 2. You want game 2? Sure, we'll take game 3. You want to take it to 7? Sure, that's fine, because we're going to win it. That's frustrating for fans, and it's really worrying, as you said, deflating of this team if they're okay with that, GoJo. So that's really worrisome once you get past teams that you should be taking out in a sweep or a gentleman's.
So,
I just can't believe, as someone who considers himself a true fan, you wouldn't feel partially responsible knowing the team loses when you go, that you continue to go, especially for these important games. Like, Dad, you know fan behavior. You watched me growing up as a kid. If Notre Dame had lost every game that I had gone to and all of a sudden we're playing for a bid to the national title, I can assure you I wouldn't be at that game. So at some point, we have to have this conversation about Claudia's culpability in all this.
I just really, Claudia, you have every day, you have an outlet here, you have a microphone, you have to really dive down into your feelings. I really feel you're deflecting, you're really staying on the surface of this thing. You're not diving in as a Celtic fan of giving us, you're reading off the stats of this, trying to remain distant, but you're not. Claudia, you're a Celtics fan. Let it out. Go ahead, let it out. Were you one of the ones when Levert hit that shot midway through the fourth that put him up 20 and started the mass exodus? Were you in that exodus at that point? Come on, dig down into your soul and tell us how you're feeling.
To be completely honest, because I had to wake up at 4 a.m, I left by the third period, y'all. I'm not going to lie. I knew we weren't going to win that game. I knew we were not. Also, I had Evan Mobley on points and rebounds, so, I was chilling. I didn't bet the Celtics. I didn't bet the Celtics for a reason. I went on Lombardi Line yesterday and said, you need to stay away from those big spreads. This is sport, right? We see it in the NFL. We see it in baseball. We see it in hockey. We surely see it in the NBA, specifically with the Celtics. They will go out and beat a team by almost 30 and then flip around and get the same thing done on them. Stop laying these big spreads, people. Stop doing it.
I'm just saying, Claudia gave me a lot of grief yesterday when I said I was going to leave the Dodgers game on
Baseball's
Wednesday
different.
early because I wanted to beat traffic and get home. And now she's saying she gets to leave the Celtics playoff game, or else the regular season's a day game on a Wednesday for the Dodgers. And she's leaving a postseason game. You guys all high and mighty in Boston giving Miami Heat fans grief for leaving arenas early. And you guys are all marching out of there like ants. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying. But I guess, Dad, we should get to the why this all happened for Claudia's Boston Celtics last night. They couldn't hit the broadside of a barn in this game. Good Lord, that was a gross shooting performance for the Boston Celtics after game 1 where they couldn't miss 18 of 35 from 3 in this game. And I'll even give them credit, Dad, and say they tried to adjust, and you heard Richard Jefferson talking about it on the broadcast, that when the shots weren't falling, I was actually in the middle of this game somewhat heartened by the response from a guy like Jason Tatum, who we've talked about a ton in this series, for going to the basket, for trying to break up that slump by just putting his head down and getting to the lane, something that when your team is in trouble is usually the way to go because you're either getting a foul or you're getting a much more high percentage bucket. But on the other side of that, they could just never, Dad, translate that into meaningful shot making. While on the other side, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were a strong three-point shooting team during the regular season, it's not like they were slouches in terms of attempts per game or their percentage, but they got hot in a way that Boston just for once couldn't keep up with. Kind of what we saw in the Heat, I think it was game 2 against the Miami Heat as well, where you got a great shooting performance out of the other side, and your side really, I think this game, Dad, as much as any game in this postseason, saw the pain of not having their big man out there in Kristaps Porzingis, because like Claudia said, the paint was open for business, and once that disparity popped in, everything was on the table for the Cavs.
Yeah, 2 big guys out, Porzingis for Boston, and Jared Allen is still out for the Cavs, got the rib injury. I think that's his 5th straight game. that he missed. A quick correction, you said 18 of 35. They were 8 of 35. There's
yeah, that's true.
They were 18 of 46 in game one. So they shot a lot better in game one. And we know they're a three-point shooting team, and it seemed to be a conscious effort to not shoot as many threes. And the difference for Cleveland, you look at Donovan Mitchell in game one, scored 33 but had no help, right? In this one, he scores less. He scores 29, but all of a sudden, you got guys playing off the bench, playing extremely well. You got what Evan Mobley did, LeVert coming off the bench, like I talked about, with hitting that jumper midway through the fourth to send everybody home. Mobley early on was just a terror inside, finishes up with 21. You get all 5 in double figures for Cleveland. So he had help this time, something that he didn't have in game one. And as far as Jason Tatum, is it what's going to happen today? Can we just say this is his personality? Are fans going to be mad because you didn't get a mad Jason Tatum up there? Now, again, that was one part of the presser. I didn't hear the whole thing. But he's not a guy that's slamming the table anyway and wasn't mad. And by the way, he's right. They did only have 16 losses. They know how to come back from a loss, and sometimes it's an ugly loss. And they're good enough to do that. So I'm just wondering if this is going to continue now, Claudia. You know that fan base better than I do. It seems like people are going to be jumping all over him again because he isn't taking it hard. Players have to move on. Fans can just wait till the next game, right? Players have to, and while having this one in mind and being mad about this one until they see what they do in game 3, while players got to put it aside in series sports, even in non-series sports, you got to put it aside and you got to get ready for the next one.
Senior, I think people will be okay with it if they win a title. Right? It's okay to be great in the regular season and make it to the end, but if you can't finish and you have that attitude, it's not great. You need a leader. Anthony Edwards is 22 years old, and he's saying, I want to kill everything in front of me. And Jason Tatum's just sitting there like, yeah, whatever, we lost a game. What do you expect? That's not what fans or anybody wants to see, GoJo.
Well, and I think that's part of it. It's like the EQ portion of being a sports star, because Dad's exactly right. Like, one of my favorite quotes, a buddy of mine played with Phillip Rivers when he was with the Chargers and said, after a particularly bad loss, Phil said to them, you don't have to show me how mad you are right now. We're professionals. Right. Let's come back to work this next week. And in general, Dad's exactly right. I always remember fans were way more upset overall in the way they showed it about losses than players, because it's self-preservation. It's, hey, I got to turn this around. I have a limited amount of time to process what happened here before I've got to focus on how we're going to adjust, what the next game plan is. And in a series sport like basketball, we see all the time in the postseason. I mean, hell, we've played NBA Finals series where there's 15-point blowouts on either side, and you got to come back the next night and play the game like it didn't matter. So I understand that mentality, but I think there is also an understanding of Dad at a certain point, and for a lot of these guys, I'm not saying it's required, but I'm saying the guys that do it well understand what the fan base is going to want to hear. Josh Hart yesterday is sitting in his locker getting asked about playing crazy minutes the way that the Knicks rotation has, and he said, hey, there's people in this city that are getting up at 6 a.m. working 12-hour shifts. Like, that's probably not how he actually feels. Or it could be. I don't know. I won't put words in Josh Hart's mouth, but guys understand how hard their job is. But he also understands, hey, I know my audience here. I know New York and what they want to hear. We've seen this from Embiid over the years. We've seen these guys be cognizant of, hey, these people don't want to hear me complain about whatever my circumstance is. And while they're certainly not getting that from Jason Tatum, I do think sometimes there's that awareness that can make your life a little bit easier if you're a star player, to just get up there and say, yeah, this is inexcusable and it won't happen again, even if you understand that might not be how you truly feel.
I agree. And we always talking about different, places around the country that can be tougher media-wise, and how, because one of the questions, especially if you go to New York, how are you going to handle the media? What are you going to say? And players are who they are. I mean, this is Jason Tatum's personality. And at the end of the day, Claudia, you are 1,000% correct. You cannot slam a table. You cannot break a chair. When fans are doing that, I don't know how many TVs were broke in Boston last night of people who weren't there. But win a championship. Win a championship and it all goes away. We're going to criticize. We're going to break down. We're going to say you're the best team and you're not living up to that. And we don't like what we hear in the presser after the game. But you win a championship and all that goes away.
Yeah, well, and I think this is one of those things, I don't know about you guys, I don't look at this and say, oh, I feel worse about the Celtics' chances of winning this series.
No.
Now, it does maybe introduce a little bit of doubt about, all right, hey, I understand this Knicks team is shorthanded and is going to have their hands full even getting out of this series with the Pacers based on who is not going to be available to them now that OG Anunoby's got a blown-out hamstring or whatever happened to him in the last game. But a team with that kind of mentality does pose a threat the way I look at this, because now you've had this happen with a Heat team sans Jimmy Butler and a Cavaliers team that's a lot more capable overall. Like, I wouldn't be stunned if the Cavs took this back home and were able to get one there too and make this a series that went 6 games based on what we've seen from them, because that's a little more whole outfit. But overall, the Boston Celtics are still the better team. They had an off shooting light, what we saw in the last series, which is possible, but with them, statistically, you know, more often than not, they're going to get back to rain dance in this thing and probably waltz through to the next round.
Yeah, I don't know what, Claudia, this is your world of what the over-under of Boston's three-point attempts is going to be next game, but it's going to be over 40. It was 46 in the first game and 35 in the second game. I don't see how it's not over 40. And they, that's what they did. That's what they were. One of the big things they were known for is dropping those threes. So I'd imagine that's going to go up again. And then it's, who gets their big man back first. We talked about Porzingis possibly later in their series coming back. Again, Jared Allen's got the ribs. In Cleveland when we caught a stray of some games ago and missed the last 5. So who maybe gets their big man back first?
Yeah, that's a great point, especially if you let them put up 60 in the paint without their big man. That's really worrying. We don't have a team total for the threes. There will be for the players. And I do quickly, before I mention one of the lines at the DraftKings Sportsbook, that is the one thing I heard a lot around me in the stands at the game. People were mad that the Celtics kept shooting the threes. And they kept saying, this is Mazzulla's fault. He should tell them to stop shooting the threes. So that's sort of where it really splits between the fans over in Boston. And I do want to ask, because GoJo, you said you could see this series going longer than most think. The line for this is 5.5 games. The over is the favorite at -130, the under at +105. Do you have a consensus here, GoJo, on what you think? It sounds like maybe the over here.
Yeah, 6 feels like a good number because I could see Cleveland winning a home game just because this isn't like Miami where we knew, hey, they played so outside themselves because without Jimmy Butler, you're really not the outfit that we expected to make the postseason run. This Cleveland team, yeah, they're missing Jared Allen, but Evan Mobley in the way that he's stepped up and come on in the course of this playoff run, I think has proven himself, especially from, going inside and crashing the boards, and even what he afforded them offensively last night. They've got something good in the former number 3 overall pick. And so, I think they're capable of winning one more in this series and taking this one to 6 games. I will push back a little bit on that notion that the Celtics just stayed with the 3 for far too long. I thought there was a good stretch there where they tried to get downhill and go at the basket, but eventually to get back in this game, especially when Cleveland's making threes at the clip they were, that's how this league works. And I think they knew at some point, hey, we're going to have to try this. We're great at it. It's one of those things where you always have that debate. Do you do what got you there? Do you adjust the game plan? Like, at some point, the Celtics are the best 3-point shooting team in the NBA. They were going to have to go back to it.
I'm with you there. I agree, Senior.
I mean, what do we always, when we see shooters having a bad night, what do they continue to do?
Right.
They continue to shoot. Mm-hmm. Boston averaged over 42 threes a game. I think 3 more than the next team during the regular season. It's what they do. And if one night, if they're not falling, do you sit there and say, okay, we better go to another attack or another form of attack? Which certainly you can. You can't just be one-dimensional. But I don't think you stop shooting what you've done the best all season. So, I keep firing up. That's what I said. It's going to be in the 40s. Again, their regular season average was just under 43. I'd imagine it's going to be right around there.
Yeah. I feel pretty good about saying I think the Celtics are going to go out and win this next game. They probably pretty decidedly after this poor showing. And I think they're going to win the series. But the games like this to me are never about the series. And it's more about, all right, can Boston maintain focus throughout the entirety of this for the reasons that Claudia brought up? It's actually kind of an interesting segue into what we'll talk about in the next segment with the late game and Luka Doncic, who has been a player who's been so good himself that people have wondered, hey, is this a guy whose attention span just sort of wanes because he's so much better at this than everybody else here? And for Boston, can you hold that together throughout the entirety of this playoff run as you get to a team like the Knicks that's so single-mindedly tough, as you get to whoever comes out of the Western Conference that's going to appear young, incredibly deep defensively in the same ways you are, and be able to go out and get through that? I think that's kind of the mental checkup you do after games like this. So I again think a lot of this is going to be fine for the Boston Celtics, and I don't know, it gives away. So I want to get to this right now before we turn. You know what? Actually, no. I'm going to save this for the next segment here because the Luka Doncic post-game press conference from the Dallas Mavericks is the place I want to start in this. Dad, what do you want to finish with?
I want to ask Claudia: Are most Celtic fans, you think, going to be like you today and putting up that shield and not letting anybody in to really know how you feel? Is that kind of what's going to go on in the city of Boston today?
I think the sane people are going to be okay with this because of everything we're saying. We know we're gonna win the series, so it's fine. Whatever. They want game 2. It's basketball. It happens. So enough with that, people. I'm not going to any more games. Okay, let's just leave it at that.
Oh, there it is. So there it is. So you do buy into that philosophy.
No, I do that because drinks are $20 a pop and driving takes 3 hours to get in. That's why.
All right, that's fair. Yeah, there you go.
Those are all fair points about it. I would say that was the one thing that kind of surprised me is I think I spent as much time in the car going to that Dodgers game as I did at the actual game itself. Pitch clock is great. We'll talk to Tim Kurkjian later on in the show today about the in-game experience, about what we've seen from Major League Baseball so far, and if Timmy would ever come and eat a churro ice cream sundae out of a helmet with me. I don't know if that necessarily seems like his style, but all that we can find out. But coming up next, let's get to the press conference sound heard around the world and the Dallas Mavericks not going quietly into this good night against the young upstart Oklahoma City Thunder. Has Dallas found something in its role players as the series shifts back to Big D? Or is this, just like Boston, a bump in the road for an Oklahoma City team destined for another round? All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We will get to what actually happened on the court for the Dallas Mavericks in Oklahoma City. They take down the Thunder in Game 2 of this series behind a gritty Luka Doncic performance. I think we can officially say that. Very little from Kyrie Irving and a supporting cast that decided to ball out. But that, my friends, is not where we can begin for this. We have to begin at the end. Luka Doncic and the post-game press conference sound heard around the world. This was Luka in the OKC press room after, very distracted by the noises that you will now hear coming through your headphones or TV screen. Take a listen.
We were open shots, so just our sharing the ball and our energy was great.
What do you think? Okay, moving on.
So,
yeah.
There's a lot of sex noises going on in this post-game press conference area, and it posed a lot of questions. It sounded very close by. If it was someone having a good time after the game, trying to get over the loss somewhere near there, or more than likely, did someone have a tab open on one of their browsers, either on their phone or their computer in that media room from earlier in the day that all of a sudden went off with the sound on here? I don't know if Dad or Claudia, you guys have theories on this, but that's probably the one that I'm most likely to subscribe to.
Or someone stubbed a toe, or someone had a churro Oreo, because I'm pretty sure that's the sound I heard out of your mouth when you tried a churro Oreo on Twitter. Or maybe somebody opened that video. Okay, so let's just take our mind out of the gutters, people.
No, our mind's staying right in the gutter. This is what we do. We may get to the game, we may not get to the game, because this is now, because you know it will come out, because I don't think it has yet with all the people in the room. We're going to find out. And Mike, I tend to agree with you. While the thoughts in our head of that being live somewhere around that area, you got to be, oh boy.
That was the thought in Luka's head.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. But I think I would agree with you. More than likely, somebody's tab was open, but whose? And man, because if you're sitting in that room and it starts going off on somebody's phone or computer or something, there are plenty of people in there that are going to know exactly who it was. So that's the next thing we're waiting for. But we've definitely over the years, certainly me over the decades of doing this, have heard different things at pressers that have been interrupted for whatever reason. But I'm not going to lie, I've never heard one interrupted by someone sounding like they're having a great time somewhere.
Yeah, see, Dad, this is the advantage of when you were coming up in media. All that stuff was paper, so it was just the turning of the pages instead of the sounds coming off the screen there that made it a lot easier to get that done in the post-game presser. I will say, I don't know what the laws in Oklahoma are, but in Texas, they have changed certain things about the access to said materials on the internet for some people, so there might have been somebody from the Dallas Media Corps who hasn't had access to a certain site that decided to block their services in the state of Texas while they were across state lines. I'm just saying, open your third eye. This might be bigger than just one moment in the press room here, but yeah, we're going to find out who it was, because you guys, we've all been in a place where you've had your phone on, where you're not supposed to. Like, Dad, we've all seen a guy in a team meeting room who inadvisedly brings their phone into the team meeting and then hears that thing go off, and you watch the instant panic reaction. I have to imagine whoever this popped up for immediately flinched, like we all do naturally. And so word is going to get out. If that person is smart, they're going to raise their hand and they're just going to admit or make a joke out of it or something, and then promptly get their press credential revoked for being completely inappropriate in the press room.
I'm trying to how long the sound went, like if the person didn't realize it right away until they go, oh my God, or said something much worse. This is coming from my computer, before they shut it down. So odds, a quick, Claudia, into the world of betting here. Would you go with it's someone from the Dallas Media Corps or Oklahoma City? I'm going with Dallas.
I was very curious where you were going with this. According, part of my handicapping process is I gather information, and based off of what I've heard from the both of you with the Dallas laws, I'm gonna say Dallas.
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably say this is a road game for somebody too. So, congratulations to whoever is the lucky lottery winner there that gave us the great viral moment from this, which kind of obscures and is the thing I saw most often talked about from a game where the Dallas Mavericks showed up in a big way in this one. Luka Doncic comes out with 16 in the first quarter, was a man possessed after spiking his face off the hardwood in this game. This game featured a couple of guys taking a dive in a big way. Chet Holmgren banged the back of his head off the deck later on, but Dad, the Mavericks, PJ Washington, and the role players on this team stepping up in lieu of a marquee Kyrie Irving game. Kyrie was never really a factor in this game at any juncture. Albeit defensively, I think you could say the biggest difference between this Mavs team and the Mavs team of old is the defensive effort they get from their star players that sets the tone for the rest of this team. This by far the best year of defense Luka has ever played. And last night, Kyrie Irving extremely active from the jump on that side of the ball.
Has to be shocking for a lot of teams that are playing Dallas this year going, oh my God, they're actually playing some defense. We haven't seen this in a while. But just like we mentioned with Cleveland, you know, we talked about how Donovan Mitchell had 33 in game one, but no help. He had less points, 29 in game two, but a ton of help. Same thing happened here. Now, Luka, who had admittedly and certainly had said he felt he was letting Kyrie down the way he was playing. He's got the bulky knee, but not using it as an excuse. Hadn't been playing well. As a matter of fact, in the 5 previous games, he was 5 of 35 from three-point land. He matched the number made last night. He was 5 of 8. So that's breaking out of the shooting slump a bit, but it's the help. It's PJ Washington with 29. It's Hardaway Jr. coming off the bench with 17. So, I mean, that's where it is. We always talk about the stars, but we have to talk about where's the help, because SGA gets 33 for Oklahoma City. You expect that out of the stars, but where does the other help come from? And that's what I think the biggest, and usually you know your 1, 2, 3 scorers, but when you get that unexpected by one of the role players that goes out of what they normally do, out of their normal box, that's when you pull off a win like this.
I will say it does still go back to, I think, credit to their 2-star players. And you heard those guys talk about it in the postgame. Kyrie and Luka draw so much attention and did in this game. Oklahoma City was either sending to their way, going to outright trap them later on in the game. Kyrie Irving finished with 11 assists in this one. And a lot of the looks for PJ Washington and these guys were coming on short corner threes that were wide open looks because you had so much attention drawn at the top of the key. And Howard Beck wrote a really good article over at The Ringer about Luka Doncic and his evolution as a player over the last few seasons. And one of the things that I thought was interesting and noteworthy about this season, where Luka's always been an incredibly high usage rate guy. He's always been a guy that, quite honestly, when you look at his on-off splits with the Dallas Mavericks, it hasn't been nearly as impactful as you would think for a player of his caliber. The Mavericks have been largely the same over the course of his career in terms of points scored with him on and off the court until this season. And one of the reasons he posited that I think is the closest to what I would say is my theory is it's because he does trust more of his teammates now, between the guys they brought over at the trade deadline in February that have helped them out defensively there, between Kyrie Irving being someone that he can count on and respect in that number 2 chair. Like, they've tried to cycle dudes through for Luka Doncic in that supporting role, but Kyrie, especially the version of him they've gotten this year, is someone Luka feels very comfortable deferring to now. And so we've seen his assist rate is up over his last few seasons and over his career this year. And I think all of that, Luka being comfortable letting go a little bit, has given way to the best version of him and the best version of this team that we've seen under him so far.
I agree, but at the end of all of that, with Kyrie scoring just 9 but having 11 assists, Luka's 3 assists away from a triple-double, those other players have to hit their shots when they're deferred to. That's when, I'm not going to take it. Whatever reason I'm doubled, I'm kicking it out. Someone's got to make it. So PJ Washington, we mentioned 29. He's 7 of 11 from three-point land. Off the bench, Hardaway Jr., 2 of 4 from three-point. Josh Green is 3 of 5. So guys were hitting it. Guys that were getting their chance, being as the stars are deferring, these guys are hitting their shots. And role players doing that on the road is even more impressive.
Yep. It's between that, the defensive effort, like we said, against this OKC team that I think still wins the series, but is going to have to learn. They had answers for every punch that Dallas threw in game 1. We'll see if they can respond now going on the road after the haymaker from the Mavs, who take game 2.
GoJo and Golic, Frank Vogel has been fired by the Phoenix Suns after just one season. He went 49-33 with the team. He said he was very confident that he would return next season and that he had full support of Ishbia, and then they got swept in the first round by the T-Wolves. So, sometimes you feel things, and sometimes that's just not the way they turn out, Senior.
Listen, I know it happens every year. Coaches get fired, but every now and then you got to look at ownership as well. How many times have we jumped on, David Tepper over with the Carolina Panthers and the firing that he does, not just on his NFL team, but from other teams he owns as well. Is this where you go? Now, what I don't know is I don't know what goes on in the locker room. I don't know the vibe. I don't know the connection. I don't know the working relationship with everybody. But, the last year, Monty Williams, before he got fired, they went 45-37, lost in the second round. The playoffs there. This year with Vogel, they actually won 4 more games. They won 49-33, but out in the first round, being swept by a team that we're seeing is pretty damn good. Up 2-0 on Denver right now. You signed into this is, again, how I'd love to go out somewhere, some way. He signed a 5-year, $31 million deal, got 1 year of it, and cannot coach if I'm sure he wants to coach, and sit there and he's owed about $24 million. What the hell are you doing? You're in cap hell with all the different, layers of the NBA cap. You are just royally screwed. I don't get it, Mike. I think a lot is put on the coaches, which I get. I understand that. As I've always said, and I will never change my mind, more is put on the players. So I'll say it again. I'm not sure of the working relationship and how that all went, but just the look of 1 year for a guy after that long deal, and you're saying, okay, you're not the guy to do it anymore. Now you're going to have 3 head coaches in 3 years. That, to me, I look squarely at ownership on that.
Well, so there's a couple ways to look at that with ownership is Matt Ishbia lighting his own money on fire, I don't care about, especially when it comes to coaches. They're not affecting the cap. That's just how much of this Matt Ishbia wants to spend. And if billionaire owners want to spend money to make the team better in their estimation, that's fine. In general, most fans would sign up for that. Listen, we don't need to get into the minutia. Being in the second apron costs you a lot of money. The second apron is the portion of the tax bracket where the Phoenix Suns live. Matt Ishbia is not concerned because he knows that's the cost of doing business, trying to build the team the way that they did over the last couple of years by signing Beal and Kevin Durant and all of these guys to come in with Devin Booker and make this happen. The part that gets interesting, though, Dad, is what you brought up with the relationship thing, because, yes, on one side, the ownership having a quick trigger finger is one thing, but you look at behind door number 2, Kevin Durant is going to be on his 6th coach in 6 years. Kevin Durant is the voice in the locker room that he would be potentially gelling with, and I heard Kendrick Perkins talking about this on SportsCenter with Scott Van Pelt last night, that down the stretch of the season, it didn't seem like Kevin Durant really rocked with Frank Vogel all that much in a way that maybe signaled to ownership. And that's one of those things where at some point, I have no problem with Kevin Durant. I generally don't dunk on him the way a lot of other people want to over the course of his career, because he's one of the most unique offensive talents and one of the best scorers in NBA history. And when you're that guy, teams are right to cater to you. But we're reaching that point in Kevin Durant's career where him being on the team alone is not worth you getting a pass to the second round of the playoffs. Same way it's not for LeBron, same way it's not for Steph anymore. And so if he's at the heart of this, the lack of the relationship or connection with the coach, at some point, if every room you walk into stinks, that might be a you problem, right?
Yeah, I would agree. You get deferred to until you shouldn't get deferred to anymore. And are we at that point? That many coaches in that many years, they have the trio of he, Booker, and Beal, though Beal, I know in the regular season was hurt a decent amount, and you get swept out of the first round. As I've said, I will always point to the players. You go back to Brooklyn with that hodgepodge mess they had there when trying to build a super team that never came to fruition. I'll put it on the players. The players are ones on the court not getting it done. So I agree with you, because there is not another sport where the player has the voice that they do in basketball that has to do with the coach, that it's him or me. A lot of times it's going to be the coach. But at some point that has to end by saying the expectation for you is to lead this team to the promised land, and we have some good pieces around you, and we ain't getting anywhere near it.
No, well, but the one thing you mentioned there that does fall on ownership is the decision to try and build your team like this. Brooklyn decided to invest in superstars that have a history of being somewhat mercurial. You were getting peak Kyrie Irving in terms of off-court and the way that he was digesting the world at that time. You brought in their buddy, James Harden, who all he knows in the NBA is forcing his way out of situations and making life difficult for people and falling short in the postseason. And so when you choose to put your faith in those people, that's on you as an organization. Joe Tsai and the ownership in Brooklyn did that after they had built up. And I think this is interesting and kind of the conundrum. I saw Knicks fans pleading with their organization yesterday to not blow up this team in the name of trying to go out and add a superstar this offseason, because that used to be the move, right? Brooklyn, before they brought in that big three, had built themselves up into a back-end playoff team. They had a young roster full of guys that had gelled together and laid a foundation for what was to come, and then they harvested that to go and bring in these guys. For Arizona, it hadn't quite been the same story, but I mean, you go back to the season after the bubble, they were in the finals against the Milwaukee Bucks, like around Devin Booker and that core, where at that point it was aging Chris Paul. You had a team that looked like it was ready and on the cusp of accomplishing something. And then Matt Ishbia comes in and says, all right, we're going to mortgage our future for the here and now. I'm going to bring in my coach and then immediately fire him when things don't go wrong. And so we're waiting to see if that becomes a pattern. But that's a choice now that we're seeing each front office making again, and maybe reconsidering, hey, am I going to go and try and just take in all these names that are going to put asses in seats and have historically been good players and see if we can continue to microwave this kind of success?
So first off, Frank Vogel, enjoy a cigar on the porch as the checks keep pouring in for you to the tune of about $24 million. And I think this goes back, I think was with Tom Haberstroh we were talking about, are we at the end of kind of putting together the super team and more
Gus
to
Johnson.
Gus Johnson, right. And more now to the building the team, because you look at the teams that are still in the playoffs and the top teams, the top ranked teams, these are all kind of built. They're not put together the way we saw, Miami putting LeBron and Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and trying to build those teams. Now, it paid off there. It paid off when Durant went to Golden State for a title. It paid off in some places at some times, but it's not as much now as opposed to the younger teams that are being built a different way.
I think it is funny you mentioned Frank Vogel also sitting back and smoking. He'll probably have a job somewhere soon based on how this goes, because as soon as this went final, the first headline after that was, the Suns' favorite target appears to be former Milwaukee Bucks head coach Mike Budenholzer. Like, we just play musical chairs with a majority of the same names, and round they go until someone sticks long enough to win somewhere. And I get Budenholzer's from Arizona. Like, there's some ties to the area. His dad was a great high school coach around there. Like, that matters in the modern NBA. I mean, let's be real. He's a big name who's worked with stars before. He's got a championship under his belt, and they're going to cycle him in there now as the next game they'll get to see if he can stick. The next name they'll get to see if he can try and stick with their star players, because Dad, I don't think in general, like, you're handcuffed to this roster. It's not like there's a lot else you can do in terms of the players, and trying to stick with it and see if, hey, even if it's unlikely, if injury as a past part of the equation is usually a good predictor of the future, you got to try and see if you can get this core on the floor long enough to actually get regular season reps together and try and make a run with them. So I get that, but this is just kind of the same wheel spinning you do when you don't have other options.
But it's what you do. It's you sell your soul for a championship, right? And you get it to pay off. We saw what the Rams did, selling their soul and not having draft picks. They win a title. You saw what they did in Tampa Bay, re-signing, or people coming down and signing to be with Tom Brady. They win a Super Bowl. If it pays off, it's all worth it. But when you get swept out of the first round and you got that monster tax bill coming, you're like, wow, this is not working out well for us right now. And to your point, probably the most important one, if you're locked in to certain players and can't get out of the situation you're in.
Yes, so Matt Ishbia officially on Tepper watch. We've got a trend. We will wait and see if this continues to become a pattern with the Suns owner and the quick showing of the door to a lot of the star coaches and players there.
GoJo and Golic, where we're getting some insight on what the Chip Kelly days looked like in Philly. This year, former Philadelphia Eagles LaShawn McCoy and Deshaun Jackson launched their 25-10 show podcast, and the latest episode dropped yesterday where they took aim at former Eagles head coach Chip Kelly.
I never had a coach, right, that was scared or not even scared, I'm going to say uncomfortable. I never met a coach that was uncomfortable with dealing with black players because let's just not hide it, right? Most of the players are black. NFL is dominated by black players. So, and there's a lot of white coaches, right?
Yeah.
But it was weird that you're uncomfortable. I'll give you some examples why I feel like that. Do you remember the cornerback? I forget his name. Black dude had a crazy nappy head, right? That was his thing. His hair he never brushed that. His, Mark Carmichael, something like that. He went to Virginia Tech as a cornerback.
Yeah.
True story. Chip calls him in the office. Now, he's going to talk to him because he's not a big player. He calls him in the office, right? And he says, now this kid is a good kid, smart. He's dark as night, right? Black kid. Hair's always nappy, right? That's his look.
Right.
He tells him in the meeting, yo, I want you to be more presentable. He says, what do you mean be more presentable? I want you to, cut your hair, man. Get a look like, like maybe like a Shady's haircut or like a, he telling the man to cut his hair. We in the pros. This ain't college. Mm-hmm. The dude came, how I know the story, because he came down to me like, yo, man, can you believe Chip told me he want to be more presentable, cut my hair, this, and that, and the third.
Yeah, that was
He's
crazy.
uncomfortable, bro, with working with black players.
GoJo, thoughts?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, listen, LaShawn McCoy has never been someone shy of hiding his opinions on anything here. And listen, Chip Kelly is not a guy that I think has gone without criticism in a number of stops that he's been at along the way. Dad, this is one of those that I think we've seen pop up a little bit more recently. LaShawn mentioned he's never met a coach like this. I mean, we just saw the whole situation that went on with Iowa football in the college level where you had coaches, and I don't even know if uncomfortable is the right word. That's his truth to digest and not mine. I'm a white guy.
Right.
He's someone who's got lived experience with this, so I'm always going to defer to him on that. But we do see, I think what he's talking about rear up in the form of people being unaware of the things like that are culturally different. That was, the militant stuff that you got at Iowa where they wanted everyone wearing the same thing and no hats and earring and no crew cuts that tend to be received differently across cultural lines that you've got to be aware of in those roles. And it seems like some of these guys at times struggle with, no matter what the level of the sport it is.
Well, again, as far as being uncomfortable around the black players, we certainly can't answer to that. And what in today's world of social media and podcasts, what you can get is I'll be interested to hear if other teammates come out and confirm these stories or add on to these stories. That will be an interesting thing. I think the part of it we can speak to, because in listening to the whole thing, the more things they talked about was about the hair to make it look more presentable, the type of music that's played in the locker room. Guys, supposedly they said he was uncomfortable with guys driving around luxury cars as well. This sounds, now again, the black-white issue I can't talk to, but those things that you bring up, that sounds like college. He can't get out of the college experience to the pros. Yeah. Remember, this was his first NFL experience. He started his coaching career at Columbia, then New Hampshire, then Johns Hopkins, then New Hampshire, then Oregon, and then the Eagles. So a lot of that also sounds like college to pro thing where just what you heard. You heard Shady say, it's the pros, man. I mean, this is the NFL. It's different in professional football. And it seemed like Chip had a tough time making that transition. Again, I'll leave, others to the black-white issue because we can't answer that. But I remember when he got there in 2013, Mike, I mean, coming from that offense he ran at Oregon, they came out and had a 33-7 lead opening day against Washington. They ended up winning 33-27, but he ran a million plays, had Michael Vick as the quarterback running all over the place as well. And everybody was like, oh my God, is this the new NFL? With 1,000 plays and you're moving at lightning speed. They lost that. They won that game. They lost their next three. They did go 10-6 and make the wild card and lost to New Orleans in the wild card. He played there. He coached there 3 years. He got fired with a game to go in 15, got hired immediately by the 49ers, lasted 1 year there and was 2-14 before he ended up in the media before he went to UCLA. So from my standpoint and our standpoint, I look at it as it was definitely a struggle, at least early on from what we heard there of the mentality of coaching college to NFL.
Well, early on, it seemed to be where the success was. Like, he won 10 games in back-to-back years, but those are the kinds of things that tend to wear on people in a very different way. Like, I think of Jim Harbaugh's first stint in the NFL, where by the end of his tenure in San Francisco, and much more top-end success there, but his personality, that jackhammer that he was then that we're waiting to see, is he built the same now, and did he change over a decade at Michigan? But that seemed to wear on people after a while, to the point where there had to be a divorce of that coach and that organization. Whereas for Chip Kelly, it was, hey, remember, it was all the sleep study stuff. It was the control in all those places. The talk of not wanting guys driving to games, wanting them to take the bus. That's a college coach who's used to having control over every part of the operation.
And you mentioned, the personality and how it can wear on you. Think of even a successful one. Look at Bill Belichick. How many players went there and hated it, but got a ring? You went there because you knew you had a great chance to get a ring. There was the famous Lane Johnson quote from the Eagles, right? I want to have a lot more fun if I'm going to win this thing than hating your life and going to practice every day, but still getting a ring. So that even happens with successful teams where you're kind of, oh my God, this is a drudgery, but I can get a ring out of this thing, or in their case, multiple rings out of this thing. So you put up with a whole lot.
By the way, this does bring up something I saw yesterday, because we talk about, hey, this is the pros. One of the biggest differences, that relationship between player-coach is much more peer than it is superior. It is much more like in college, you call everybody coach so-and-so. In the NFL, it's first names. It's you guys talking as people with shared experience in this and trying to problem solve. And I saw a tweet yesterday where someone tried to claim that for the entirety of their life, they had called their friends' parents by their first name. That was something for me as a player was jarring going to the NFL, but as just a human being, like Claudia, there's enough of an age gap here to where I'm curious what the difference was. Because even now, it's hard for me to call my friends' parents by their first names, depending on when I met them in my life. I don't know if that's still the same for you, basically a generation behind or not.
I still call my friends' parents Mrs. So-and-so. It feels weird because I'm an adult, but I just do. I don't know. It feels wrong.
Feels weird. Yeah. Feels weird to me. It makes me feel older because I go to games. I've had J.J. Watt at a game. I've had the Kelsey brothers, Sam Darnold. I've had all of them say, hey, Mr. Golic, how you doing? I'm like, God, I feel old. It's just wild hearing that, that you're not, because you're right, Mike. In the pros, it's not coach this or coach that. It's on a first name basis. So yeah, it's kind of weird to still hear the Mr. stuff. And all your and Jake's friends still do that, with me and your mother, calls, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Golic. And it's kind of weird.
Well, I was going to say, that's the funny part to me is like future gold jackets. People with kids of their own at this point that you're talking about there coming up and referring to you like that is just a reminder when you meet someone at that place in life like that, it's the part of adulthood they don't prepare you for amongst many other things. It's like doing your taxes and this of having to learn how to call your friend's parents by their first name and somehow getting comfortable with that. Because we all do that weird conversation where they bring it up for the first time and try and tell you to call it that. And then it's like stepbrothers where you're like, okay, Mr. Doback, like, I don't know what to do with this. And apparently the Philadelphia Eagles and Chip Kelly had some of that same problem. I wonder if he was weird about the first name thing or not. But either way, I mean, I'm sure, like you said, Dad, other players, they called, I think it was Jason Peters during this podcast and basically had him co-sign this. I believe they also... Carmichael, the player that they mentioned, Rock Carmichael, actually tweeted later on, quote tweeted the story from an aggregator account and said, I never told my story. I knew the time would come. Hashtag thank you. So probably not the end of this dynamic we're getting ready to hear about, and probably the beginning of some download subscriptions, rating, and reviews for Shady and LaShawn's podcast as we get another one added to the fold. But while we leave that in the background there, we'll get to more NFL later on, potentially, and more NBA. Coming up next, let's tap into some Major League Baseball. Outside of me just going to a game on Wednesday, we're going to talk to Tim Kurkjian about one big-time prospect getting ready to make his way onto the Major League scene next here on GoJo and Golic.
top pitching prospect will make his debut on Saturday. Former LSU pitcher, now with the Pirates, will face off against the Cubs. And while it looked easy in college for him, carving up the hitters, it's looking just as easy for him in AAA. Sub-1 ERA with 45 strikeouts, GoJo.
It's been incredible so far. We saw yesterday the reaction from his girlfriend and LSU gymnastics star, Livy Dunn. So everybody's fired up for this, including our next guest. We're pumped to bring back our friend, ESPN MLB analyst, and the co-host of Is This a Great Game or What? The podcast with Tim Kurkjian and his son, Jeff. Tim, kind enough to join us here now. Good morning, Tim. How you doing?
I'm well, fellas. How are you guys?
We're doing well, Tim. Doing well. Listen, we're going to talk baseball, but obviously, we got a father-son show here. You have now done about 8 podcasts with your son. And as I said before we came on air, I hope he is treating you with the respect that you deserve, unlike what my son is doing with me.
No, it's going really well. We have a great chemistry together, but we had an odd thing happen the other day. I was explaining to Jeff how Ezekiel Duran faced Johan Duran. So we had a Duran pitching matchup. This was from a couple years ago. And I was yelled at on the air by Roxy Bernstein doing a radio game that I didn't know one Duran song. So I asked my son, who's in the music business, you must know a bunch of Duran songs. Neither one of us knew one Duran song. Is that humiliating for a father and son at our age to not know anything like that?
Oh my God.
I mean, Tim, I'm going to be honest. I couldn't name a Duran song right now. Like, Dad, I'm sure this is supremely disappointing for you. You've probably got this in your repertoire, but yeah, I couldn't name you one.
Oh, I easily come up with "Hungry Like a Wolf." I mean, that's the one that's they're so well known for.
Well, one of the moms from church came over the other day, and she had listened to the podcast. She said, "Hi, Tim, hungry like a wolf." And I said, "What does that mean?" And she goes, "That's the Duran song that everybody knows that you don't know." So I used it on the air for the next podcast. And stupid me, I said, "Angry like a wolf." I didn't even get the song title right. So we had to cut it out because I was trying to show, hey, I figured this out, and I didn't even get it right. That's how terrible I am.
Yeah, that's the biggest
Tim,
one.
this is exactly like when this was like when Taylor Swift's tour was the biggest thing on planet Earth, and my dad was calling NFL games, and she had just done something, and my dad asked me to write him a couple of lines that he could use about Taylor Swift to use on his Westwood One football broadcast to try and sound like he knew what he was doing. And I'll actually give you credit, Dad. I was listening with you and Ryan Radke, and you managed to pull it off all right, but every once in a while, we all need a little bit of help, Tim, so don't worry about that. You don't got to feel bad about not knowing Duran.
It's good to know there's another podcast, father and son, there's just as dopey as my son and me. So that's great.
I'm not going to say I would have known "Hungry Like the Wolf" song. I would have known Rio. I would have known the Reflex. There are a few I would have known, but those are great moments. Listen, Timmy, those are great moments you have with your son. So again, we're really happy, and it's very cool that you guys are doing that together. So on to baseball, as Claudia, as we mentioned, Paul Skenes getting ready to make his debut. And I'm not saying it's going to be one of the greatest debuts of ever, but it makes me want to bring up, for you have been involved in this game as long as you have, what are one or two of the top debuts you've ever seen?
Well, I think the best debut that I've ever seen was Steven Strasburg, who, of course, was, so ballyhooed coming out of San Diego State. And I did the first game from the ballpark, and I did it with Oral Hershiser. So I'm sitting next to a great major league pitcher. We're on the field pregame and postgame, and Strasburg that night struck out 14, walked 0. No one had ever done that in his major league debut, and it was completely dazzling. And I'm telling you, fellas, I interviewed him after the game on live TV. And he was still so much in the zone from where he was in a trance still from that. He had no idea what I was asking him. He couldn't even answer the questions properly because he was still so focused on pitching in his major league debut. I think that's the most anticipated debut that I can remember. And it doesn't include Ohtani, of course. He's always in a different category. His first start was electric also because of his situation from Japan. But I think, and I overstate things sometimes, I think the Paul Skenes debut will be the most anticipated non-Yamamoto Ohtani debut since Steven Strasburg. I think you could make a case.
I don't think we've ever seen a picture like this. This is a franchise.
Timmy, for those that are coming into this, because you're right, this is attracting a lot of fanfare. It seems bigger than just exactly what's going on with the Pirates. If people didn't watch his run at LSU, what can they expect? What is the hallmark of Paul Skenes, and what is the thing about his game that you enjoy the most and think can translate to that kind of splash early on?
Well, he throws 102. It's a good place to start. He has tremendous elite control and command. He has secondary stuff. He's also bigger than, well, he's probably bigger than both of you guys right now. He's 6'6", 235. And when he was at LSU, I was told that he would look at his manager before every start and say, I'm not coming out until the game is over. And that kind of attitude, that kind of philosophy, we just don't get that anymore in college or in pro ball, certainly not in the big leagues. It's just not the mentality, but he has it. And his numbers, fellas, at AAA were like little league numbers, 27 and a third innings, 0.99 ERA, 8 walks, and 45 strikeouts. Look, I understand AAA isn't what it used to be. The gap between AAA and the big leagues is wider now than maybe it has ever been. But it was a man among boys at AAA. And I fully expect him to come to the big leagues and be really good right away. Because I repeat, 102 with secondary stuff and elite command is going to play anywhere.
For a Pittsburgh team right now, 5.5 games behind Milwaukee in the Central. As far as the season overall, we're 37, 39 games in that area there. The biggest lead in the division is the Dodgers, 6.5 over the Padres. So is the season kind of chalky for you right now, going the way you thought, or are there some things in there that you didn't expect to see?
Well, this is the beauty of baseball. Every year I slap my forehead after a month and go, what is going on here? How did this happen? How come we couldn't see this coming? No one saw the Guardians being this good. I didn't see them being able to score enough runs. And after Shane Bieber went down, I didn't think they had any chance to be as good as they've been, and they have really played well. And in the same division, the Royals lost 106 games last year, and they are playing really, really well. Out of nowhere, the AL Central has suddenly, other than the White Sox, become a pretty competitive division. The Twins won 12 games in a row. The Tigers are better than people think. So this is why baseball is the greatest game, is it provides surprises, good and bad, all the time. And to me, among many things, I think the AL Central is the biggest surprise as a whole.
So that's a surprise on a positive end for a couple of the teams you just mentioned there. Timmy, what's happened to the Houston Astros here, the class of the American League for so long here, and the struggles they've had early this season?
Yeah, they've got some real problems right now. Fellas, they've had 4 4-game losing streaks already. They had 3 the last 2 years combined. That's how big a struggle it has been. Their starters ERA is well over 5 per game, and they've been a great starting rotation team for the last 7 to 10 years. Their bullpen with Abreu, Presley, and Hader was supposed to be an unprecedented back end of a bullpen, and it has struggled. And even their offense, which always seems to score runs, even the offense has struggled. Alex Bregman is right around 200. A couple other guys really haven't gotten going. I am totally surprised what has happened to the Astros, but I refuse to count them out every time I look up there in the NL or ALCS. So I'm not giving up on them, but boy, are they off to a rugged start, and they better get their starting pitching straightened out, or else this isn't going to go well.
always some good and bad in every sport and every season. Mike was just at a Dodgers game that took, I think, under 2 hours. I mean, that's been the good of baseball, how much the pitch clock has helped in moving games along. Is the bad still, and we talk a lot about in the NBA playoffs, Timmy, the officiating. The whistle blows so much in the NBA more than any other sport. But in baseball, there's one guy that's involved in every play, and that's the home plate umpire on every pitch. And I just saw a top 10 strikes missed by umpires. And I know it happens every year, but of course, number one was Angel Hernandez. Is there an umpire issue in Major League Baseball for balls and strikes, or no?
Listen, I'm way in the minority on this. I don't think there's a ball strike issue. I umpired a lot of games when I was a kid, and I like to think I understand how difficult that game is. Just imagine you're standing behind home plate and they're throwing 98 miles an hour with unbelievable movement. Look, you two guys played football in college and the NFL and all that. I'm telling you, you guys would have a lot of trouble getting behind home plate. After 10 pitches, I would say, get me out of here. This is too hard. This is too dangerous. This is too scary. And yet we insist that our umpires not miss a call that's 2 inches off the plate when the pitch is coming in at 100 miles an hour. And imagine with that box that we get to see on the air every day, the guy at home has a better look at the ball strike call than the umpire. Imagine if you guys had somebody hanging over your shoulder, and every time you stumbled on a word, someone would correct you right there on the air. That's what it's like to be a major league umpire. Are some of them good? Yes. Do some of them miss a lot of calls? Yes. But unless you want to go to a completely automated strike zone, which I'm not in favor of, I think we need the human element. We're just going to have to put up with guys missing a pitch that's 3 inches in or out. It happens because they're human.
Somebody hanging over your shoulder. My family's done that for decades on me when I say something stupid on air, Timmy. So that's there, no doubt about it. I got to know.
I was going to say it's Twitter for me. It's the group chat for my dad for sure. We make sure he feels it.
Timmy, I got to ask. You said you umpired years and years ago. You're one of the nicest guys around. How many managers, players, or parents did you run in your time as an umpire?
I never ran anybody. Look, I'm coaching little league kids. I'm not about to throw anybody out of a game, but I'll tell you quickly, this was like a Woody Allen movie. I made a call in a game, a rule violation call, and the coach, and I'm like 16 years old, he comes out of his dugout and starts screaming at me in front of the entire crowd. This umpire has no idea what he's doing. Well, the same game, the supervisor of umpires was at the game. He knew the rule that I was talking about, and he then got up in front of the entire crowd and screamed at the coach and said, "You are wrong. The umpire's right. You need to apologize to him in front of all these people. You yelled at him, and you were wrong." So I didn't run anybody, but that was a great day for me because the supervisor of umpires backed me up because I was right.
That is great.
Wow. All right, you know what? We loved it. We love to see when someone in a position of authority goes out and has their folks back. So I'm glad to hear he had your back in that moment, Timmy.
Right. And my son was an umpire, Jeff, who I do the podcast with. So this is his first game umpiring. He's the base umpire. There are only 2 umpires. There's a runner on first base. There's a pop-up to the second baseman, and some idiot in the crowd screams, "That's an infield fly rule. That's an infield fly rule." No, it's not. You have to have the bases loaded or first and second with less than 2 outs. He's screaming at my son. Then he looks around. I look at this guy. He recognizes me, and he goes, "Oh, you're the baseball guy. That's an infield fly rule, isn't it?" And I said, "No, that's not an infield fly rule, and that's my son that you're yelling at. So why don't you get your facts straight before you yell at somebody?" That was the first game my son ever did, and instead of being the supervisor of umpires, his father told him, "You got it wrong, and quit yelling at him."
Oh my God, this is phenomenal. This is just phenomenal.
Oh.
I bet you were more mad in that moment than you ever were when anybody yelled at you because they were yelling at your son.
Right. Look, I can take people yelling at me because I'm an easy target and I deserve it. But my son did not deserve that, not in his first game as an umpire.
Timmy, I don't think anyone deserves to yell at you. I'll say that first and foremost right now. But
Awesome.
I'm still glad to see you had your sons back there. Tim, before we get you out of here, we mentioned a couple of times off the top, the Dodgers have been exactly what we expected so far. Is it fair to characterize it that way?
Yeah, they're great, fellas, and they're only going to get better from here. We've seen how great their offense is. Ohtani is ridiculous how good he is. Mookie Betts moving from right field to shortstop, virtually unprecedented, and just continues to crush. Their lineup 1 through 4 is going to be the best 1 through 4 hitters statistically in any season of any team ever. That's my prediction. Yamamoto, the guy from Japan, is freaking tremendous. Upper 90s, elite command, split from hell. They are so good, and they're starting to get their pitchers healthy. Walker Buehler pitched on last Monday. They're going to get Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin and Clayton Kershaw back. They have a chance to have the best rotation in baseball when September, October rolls around, and they are a steamroller offensively. They're just as good as we thought, and they're getting better.
So one of the things we thought may be a big headline was obviously Shohei and his interpreter and what went on there as we find out more and more. And it seems as we're finding out more and more, Timmy, correct me if I'm wrong, it does seem like when we talked about this before that it is definitely, there is going to be really nothing that goes on with Shohei in this, correct? As far as an investigation or finding him doing anything wrong.
Yeah, I just don't see it. And maybe I'm the most naive guy in the world, but I think he's been fairly well cleared because the federal government got involved in this. This isn't baseball just trying to whisk something away. So I think he's okay. I don't think we're going to hear much about this. And even though some of this obviously is self-imposed because he didn't understand what his interpreter was doing, but it's just amazing to me how he has produced the way he has with everything swirling around him. It just speaks to the focus that he has, the trance that he can go into when there's a game to be played. It's just breathtaking to watch him hit because he is an MVP candidate again this year, and he's not even pitching. He's just the DH.
It's been an incredible show out here in Los Angeles that's just going to keep rolling along. Speaking of incredible shows, make sure you guys download Is This a Great Game or What? Tim Kurkjian, his son Jeff, breaking down baseball in addition to all the great work that you do as well covering the game. Tim, thanks so much. We always appreciate your time out here.
All right, fellas. Thanks so much. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, Tim. Wow. I mean,
Dad, so I want to ask you because Tim getting fired up and coming to defense of his son at that baseball game. What was the most fired up you ever got with us as kids, between me, Jake, or Sydney as a sports parent or as a sports coach, where you had to snap into action like that?
There was a Jake was playing. I don't know if it was one of his travel teams or on AAU. I can't remember. But as anybody who's heard me talk over the last couple of decades, Jake was the best athlete of you three kids. I think you would even admit that, Mike. But Jake also liked to be really physical, and didn't matter the sport. Football, obviously, lacrosse, a lot of time in the penalty box, and basketball. He was a force inside at a young age. I remember one game that there was a kid with a breakaway, and Jake did the LeBron thing, run it down from behind, and Jake blocked this ball off the backboard, but also took the kid right into the wall behind the backboard. And Jake already had a lot of eyes on him because he was 6'4" in like 7th grade. So it was one of those you better bring your birth certificate type situations. There was a guy that stood up yelling at Jake, threatening to call the police on Jake for that move. So yeah, that was a move. That was something I stepped in on pretty quickly and pretty harshly on that dude.
Yeah, AAU basketball parents in the sports pantheon of parents. probably in their own spot altogether there. So I do remember that clear as day. The ball went off the back wall and hit that kid directly in the face as he went careening into the wall here. A+ stuff from Jake, no doubt.
Of GoJo and Golic, and the defending champ Denver Nuggets look to crawl out of an 0-2 deficit to the Minnesota Timberwolves on the road now in Minnesota after going down 26 in Game 2. Jamal Murray, how do you come back from that?
Like I said, our only mentality is to go in the next game and play as hard as we can and do better of silencing the runs, not making them as big as they were. And obviously just trying to limit our mistakes. And we're making a lot of mistakes, uncharacteristic mistakes, and we know we can do better.
And with that, we go to Cash It or Trash It, presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned to hear everything DraftKings has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. Game 3, Denver catching 4.5 points at Minnesota. Denver plus 154 on the money line. Some good plus money there. So, Senior, are we cashing or trashing a Denver win here?
I'm cashing that. I'm taking that. I'll go for that money. And boy, it's that Minnesota is going to be rocking. That place is going to be crazy with what this team is doing. But I just think Denver's just too good a team to go down 3-0. I really do, though. This Minnesota defense has been incredibly stifling. Mike, I just have a hard time to believe that the defending champs are going to go down 0-3.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. The minute everyone starts thinking, oh yeah, Minnesota's going to sweep this thing, and we're all so certain about what this team is, this seems like the perfect time for them to drop a game, especially going back home. So I would cash that one as well. I think there's a very good chance they managed to pull this off. And Dad, it'll be interesting. Can this Minnesota team that has displayed a ton of maturity, and they've got, veteran parts, Cat and Gobert have been around forever, all these guys, but Anthony Edwards, who's answered the bell at every tone, can they go back home with that rush of energy, with that feeling of, all right, hey, we're up 2-0, we did our job and then some on the road, and have the maturity to come back home and work through it and maintain that focus the way we talked about. Wayne, with even a team like the Boston Celtics, as good as they are and as dominant as they've been, it's easy to every once in a while let your foot off the gas, and that's the last thing. While on the other side for Denver, you've had all these headlines about, does Jokic really just want to go home and do the horse stuff right now? Are they really as focused as they need to be? Jamal Murray's throwing heat packs on the court. This all seems like the recipe for the funniest thing to happen, which would be Denver winning a game on the road here after all of that humiliation.
Yeah, Rudy Gobert back after missing for the birth of his child. So he's back on the court, and for a team that was already so defensively big time against Denver. So it'll be interesting to see what he adds to this. Yeah, it seems weird to say the way Minnesota has controlled this, that Denver now is going to go to Minnesota. But what you heard, and try and get their first win. But you heard Jamal say, just what you heard Jason Tatum say. You just go out and play the next game, right? I mean, you put that game behind you. Different role players may step up, in different games. It changes scenes now as far as where you're playing. And that's what you have to do. You just got to put it in the rearview mirror and move on to the next one. And that's exactly what they're going to do. Are they good enough to come back and win the series? Hell yes, they are. Yes, I would without question be more surprised that they are down 0-3 after this game than get their first win of the series.
And Jamal Murray, who has been the subject of a lot of scrutiny coming off of that Game 2 performance, certainly on the court, dealing with the calf strain, things that have affected his game. Dad, he's going to be the most important player for them because this team is a unique challenge for Nikola Jokic. Karl Anthony Towns on his own was able to do a lot in stymieing Jokic, the scorer, in their last game, and now getting Rudy Gobert back. I mean, we saw the frustration that Jokic had after Game 1, where he got asked what more he can do and basically said, have a clone of myself to be able to deal with the waves of bodies they can throw at him during that game. And so it's going to be incumbent on Jamal Murray as the other portion of one of the deadliest tandems in the NBA to initiate a lot of their offense, to get guys like Michael Porter Jr. set up for shots that they can knock down and get confident with early on. And Aaron Gordon, who I've always said is the swing state for this Denver Nuggets team because he's such a unique body type matchup for opposing teams, it's going to be on Jamal Murray to, I think, be the one to initiate for a lot of those guys, the same way we saw Kyrie Irving and Luka initiating and getting the role players going for the Mavericks on the road last night.
Yeah, I mean, and remember, this Denver team has been at home. That's when your role players are supposed to step up the most in Game 2, and they were getting smoked. They really had one guy who was it, Justin Holiday, I believe, coming off the bench and scoring 13. Gordon had 20 in that, but the only other double-digit guy was Jokic. So just like we talked about in the other series where, Donovan Mitchell for the Cavs is getting help from other players, there was no real other help going on there for Jokic, who didn't have a monster game either, but didn't get the help anywhere else. And that's where the role players are supposed to help you the most, at home, and now they're going on the road. So we'll see if they can step up in this one.
We'll see if they can. The other series that we've got coming up tonight, Claudia, Knicks and Pacers, and I did appreciate this from the Pacers outfit after their head coach comes out and is reading everyone the riot act about officiating. The Pacers players came out and said, no, this isn't about them. This isn't about small markets. This is about us.
I mean, we love Rick showing that type of energy on the court, and unfortunate that he got ejected, but that's not the feeling that we have in the locker room. We're not going to sit here and blame officials. We got to be better. It's just that simple.
I mean, that's not my job. I don't really. I mean, at the end of the day, we got outplayed. We were right there to win the game. Would I like consistency? More consistency, yeah, but let's not pretend like that's the only reason we lost. We just didn't play good enough.
See, I love that, and that's exactly how it should be. Players take the responsibility on the court. They're not the ones that should be trying to, converse with the refs or change their minds. That's the coach's job. I wonder, Claudia, I wonder this. 78 plays. I'd like to hear from both of you on this. 78 plays for the first 2 games they sent to the league. Do we think the league actually looked at all 78 plays?
I mean, they're going to say they did. They probably
sure
pressed play and watched each play. That's basically the whole game, though. So you're technically rewatching the whole game. Is it not 49 in game 2, 29 in game 1? And you can tell this is really bothering Carlisle because he said in the presser after game 1, I'm not going to send anything in. I'm mad about it, but I'm not going to send anything. And then as he sent it in for game 2, he's like, actually, you know what? I am going to send it in for game 1. So ended up sending 78 in total. And Senior, I agree with you. It's not on the players to talk about the refs. We know there's a reason they get fined if they do so. But this seems a little ridiculous to send in 78, GoJo.
Yeah, I remember grinding my feet on Eddie Murphy's couch. That seems to be the energy they're keeping with this. Just do it in TikTok form. I'm sure the plays aren't all that long. So if you just do it that and have someone in the league office who's Gen Z scrolling through it, I think you could get those consumed fairly quickly, since that's the way most of them are probably watching NBA games now anyway. 7-point favorites are the Pacers at home, by the way. I think everyone looking at how close those games have been, the fact that there's just injuries continuing to mount. I mean, Jalen Brunson, who's going to play, but's been listed as questionable with that foot injury from game 2. Dad, all of this you'd think has to add up for them at some point, right? The Pacers, with all of their depth and the way that they've performed on the road through the first 2 games, have to win this game, and I think should.
I mean, are the Knicks the better team? Yes, I think they're the better team. But to me, I mean, that they're playing on some borrowed time. I mean, you already with Mitchell Robinson has hurt that rotation being out. Guys who the starters playing all the minutes are getting nicked up. And it's not like that's going away. You don't get healthier as the season gets longer. That doesn't happen. All you can try and do is maintain and try not to lose anymore, which is a difficult battle to do. So, like I said, the Knicks are better, but I could absolutely see the Pacers making a run at this just out of attrition.
I mean, the Pacers were in all of these games. They had a big lead in the middle 2 quarters of this last game, and so it's not like they haven't been competitive. They did it in an extremely raucous environment there at Madison Square Garden, and so now going home, no OG Anunoby, who was huge for the Knicks at the beginning of that second game as well before his injury, and Jalen Brunson, who, it's one thing, Dad, you know this, when you're injured in the middle of a game and you stay warm and you just push through it and you're working off adrenaline, that's one thing, but now with that time in between for this to settle for a guy whose style of play is incredibly stop-start and incredibly physical, I'll be very curious to see, much like we've been watching Luka this entire series in Dallas, when Jalen Brunson comes out, who I actually think style of play pretty similar, how he's going to look early on in this game with that sore foot starting to become a factor. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Claudia Bellafato. Dad, we got news handed down this morning. Toronto is one of the cities that's been awarded a WNBA franchise that's set to start play in 2026, according to multiple reports, but seen here on ESPN. It'll become the league's first team outside of the U.S. Kilmer Sports, headed by Toronto billionaire Larry Tannenbaum, who's a minority owner and chairman of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment that owns the Leafs and the Raptors, going to be at the helm for this one. So we've talked about it in recent days, the charter flight news that I think, and I even saw this note from people connected to the WNBA PA, kind of came out of nowhere. It hadn't been talked about necessarily between the league and the PA, but showed up and now is going to be part of the WNBA future here sooner than later. And then the expansion that had been often talked about with Toronto now being the first international team for the WNBA, the arrow continues to point up for this league.
Well, it does. In a league that was talked about and losing like $10 million a year, had their biggest revenue year last year by over, I think, 200%. With gross revenue being $200 million. So they're certainly bringing in more money. They do get the $15 million a year, I think it is, from the NBA, but a monster jump in revenue that you don't see changing anytime soon. And I would imagine you continue expansion because remember, like it was last year or the year before, there was the talk of some of the first round picks that weren't making teams in the WNBA because there wasn't room for some of these rosters and how it was all going. So they did need to expand. We'll see if they can get more revenue sharing. They don't get much of a percentage of the revenue now in their salaries. So that will be the next thing. And it's all in relation to what you're bringing in, to far as what you're going to get from a salary standpoint. But for them, if they can get a bigger piece of the pie, just like we talk about the other major sports in the men's side, you're talking anywhere 48, 49, 50% split. I think it's 10, 15, 20%, if that, the WNBA.
10.
So we'll see 10%. We'll see if and when that can go up.
Yep. There's been a lot of attention. The young stars coming into this league are great right now. Shout out to my old workmate and WNBA great Chiney Agwumike, wrote a great article in the Players Trib, kind of highlighting what you talked about there, Dad. The things that have gone into this as people were freaking out about Caitlin Clark and the rookie salaries and what goes into that. I think they have an opt-out in their collective bargaining agreement after next year. So I'd expect the dollars to start changing soon, considering how much money we're seeing flood into the sport right now. So again, Toronto will be the 14th team in the WNBA. The expansion franchise in Golden State is expected to be up and running by next year's season, and then followed by this Toronto team in 2026. So a lot of great stuff happening there. It's fun to see the continued growth and the way already, Caitlin Clark mania has spilled over into the preseason for the WNBA, and I'd expect this will be an exciting year on that front in a lot of ways. Dad, you mentioned that leap financially there. Let's talk in a different way in the NFL. Claudia, about the leap to year 2 for some players coming up here. We had an exciting rookie class in last year's NFL season, certainly highlighted by guys like C.J. Stroud and Puka Nacua. But now, as we add another draft class behind them, the expectations are only going to grow, and there's some very interesting situations out here.
Yeah, there is, and you mentioned it. C.J. Stroud at the top of the board. NFL.com put out the top 5 from 2023 rookies. And I don't think that was too much of a surprise in Stroud, number 2 overall. You had Nacua, I think, which was, of these 5, the biggest surprise 5th-round pick, and he was big for the Rams. Jalen Carter for Philly, number 9 overall in the draft. Laporta, second tight end off the board, and then Devin Witherspoon, who is regarded as the top corner, ended up being a top 5 rookie. And we talk about sophomore slump a lot, I think, in baseball and some other sports. NFL also. So, Senior, when you look at this list, do you see anybody who you think might have a sophomore slump, or do you just see them all ascending even further?
Well, obviously with C.J. Stroud, they just keep building around him. So, but 23-5 last year, touchdowns, interceptions. And it's usually the goal of every quarterback is to not throw double-digit interceptions. And this guy only threw 5 while throwing for over 4,000 yards. So, and the expectation is to improve in your sophomore year, which would be incredible. I think it'll be hard for him to match those numbers, especially the turnover numbers. We'll see. Puka Nacua, now we got to remember Cooper Kupp only played 12 games. If Cooper Kupp is healthy for the year, that may take some, which is a good problem to have. if you're a Ram fan. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but if Cooper can be healthy and play 16, 17 games, then I think the numbers go down for Puka a bit, but it actually could be better for the Rams. Jalen Carter had 6 sacks last year. You need the pressure still to come from around him. They had 43 as a team. You need others to be able to jump in there as well, but he'll probably get some added attention, which he certainly started getting later in the season for what he did. I don't see why Sam Laporta can't continue to be the weapon that he is. And Witherspoon, I believe he didn't play a full season either, correct? If I remember correctly, on what he played in Seattle. I'm trying to see real quick, as far, and that's always obviously a big thing is how much can you get in, how much of the season. Yeah, he played 14 games, so he didn't miss that many. He had the 1 interception. I think it was a pick 6 for like 97 yards. The DBs came in and played well last year, the rookie DBs. So, yeah, I mean, some of these guys aren't going to have the numbers they had in their rookie year, though.
But I think for a lot of these guys, the context hasn't changed. The Texans still have a great roster that's actually got some depth built up along it after last season. Sam Laporta is still on an offense that's got a lot of the same pieces involved. Has re-signed a bunch of the offensive line there, although did lose Jonah Jackson this year. And so I think for the guys whose context didn't change, there's going to be the adjustment of now teams have a full year of tape on you, but those offenses and those outlets also have other weapons and things for you to hold. The guys that I look at as interesting are places where there's been coaching changes or a major roster change, like with, you mentioned Jalen Carter. All right, Fletcher Cox, while he had certainly aged out of a lion's share of the reps in that organization, was still a big force in that room. And so now you're replacing that for Jalen Carter. Kobe Turner, who was sensational for the Los Angeles Rams at defensive tackle, the 3rd-round pick for them last year. Aaron Donald doesn't live there anymore. Now, Kobe Turner last year, according to Next Gen Stats, had 22 quarterback pressures when double-teamed in 2023. Only Quinnen Williams had more amongst defensive tackles. That even includes Aaron Donald. So he was used to the extra attention to some extent, but it's still different when 99's not out there. You've got the youth movement on that D-line now with your 1st-round picks and Jared Verse and then Braden Fisk out of Florida State both coming over, but a lot more on his shoulders, Dad, in a way that's going to be really interesting for a Rams defense that's also undergoing a change because Raheem Morris is no longer the coordinator there.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see that jump from year 1 to year 2, but also the rookies coming in. I'm trying to think which rookie quarterback is going to have their team make the biggest jump coming into this year. Is it going to be Caleb Williams with all that Ryan Poles has put around him? Of the guys that are going to start, Michael Penix Jr. is not going to start or not going to play, barring injury in Atlanta. But the guys that are going to contribute right away, J.J. McCarthy is going to have a Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson. So that is always interesting to me. It's not just about the quarterback, but it's about where he is and the weapons he has around him.
I'll go for one more second-year guy also in this, just because I think for a lot of people, both fans of this team and fantasy owners as well, Bijan Robinson. There was so much frustration in Arthur Smith's offense with the way that he got used, what was going on in the red zone there. And the thing I'll say is now, I don't think Zach Robinson was here during this era of the Sean McVay tree, but what did we see this last year? Sean McVay and the Los Angeles Rams went back to being a team somewhat centered around their running back. They had weapons everywhere, but that team wanted to ground and pound you to death. And if you listen to Sean McVay and the DNA of this coaching tree talk early in his career about one of the most important players for the Rams when he got over there, it was Todd Gurley and the way that they used him. And so I do think for Bijan Robinson, Zach Robinson coming over here, having that versatile and talented of a weapon in the backfield, I don't think we'll have to worry about a lack of touches in critical situations the way that seemed to frustrate so many people last year.
Another guy I'm interested in is Rashee Rice, right out of Kansas City. Has the issues, obviously, in the offseason he had. Second leader receiver, really hit it well for that team who picked up Xavier Worthy in the 1st round, the speedster out of Texas. So I'll be interested to see what kind of second year that Rice has.
Yeah, certainly a lot of unforeseen issues popping up there that complicate it. And we know the Chiefs went out and drafted wide receiver in the 1st round after that trade and all these different things. But Rice became one of the guys Mahomes could count on in a receiver room where that was very difficult to come by. All right, guys, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories. Send everybody into the weekend here. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review our show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live when you can, Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. If you missed that, the best of GoJo and Golic is noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. And if you missed that or any of our great guests, shout out to ESPN MLB analyst Tim Kurkjian for joining us to talk about everything going on around Major League Baseball right now. You missed it, you can check it out wherever you get your podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Guys, let's get to some important news in this. Warner Brothers is set to release the first of a new batch of Lord of the Rings films starting in 2026, apparently centered around the character Gollum. Dad, I know for you, this has been a real struggle with me and you, because you're someone who's very into things like Game of Thrones, fantasy and sci-fi aren't totally off the map for you, and if for some reason you decide to dump all over Lord of the Rings. So now that we're getting a new installment of it here, the graphics and everything will be better. It'll be a fresh new look at the franchise. Are you ready to give it a chance?
As long as it's not 3 hours. I mean, how long? That's what I want to know. How long is the movie going to be? I hated it. I'd rather have sharp pencil sticks in my eyes than watch that. Oh, my God. I don't know, Mike, I don't know why. But I know I like these types of movies. I didn't like this franchise. I just didn't.
Apparently.
It just... Oh, I couldn't stand it. And then it being as long. How many times you think it's ending and it's not? My God, I think I have to go to the bathroom in the theater, but then I'm like, oh, it's almost over. And then it's not, and then, I mean, my God, it's brutal. I'm sorry. It's brutal.
Can I just say, Claudia, this is the most Gen Z thing about my dad, who, by the way, has more Gen Z. I go out to breakfast with him and my mom, and they're on their phones the whole time. My dad can watch 1 million TV shows in a row on his iPad, but can't be bothered with the attention span to sit through a 2.5-hour movie, even one as great as the Lord of the Rings. Dad, you might have joined Gen Z with your consumption habits. This might be who you are.
We are not on our phones the entire time during breakfast. Don't lie like that. We are not at all.
GoJo, I feel like you're always on Twitter, though. There's no way that you're not on your phone.
Yes.
No, I'm always on Twitter, but when I'm eating with my family, who I see very infrequently, I stuff the phone. You can ask any of my friends or family. When I'm around people in person, I put the phone away, I get off that, and I try my best to be present, and then I look over, and my dad's scrolling on his phone, and I see him scrolling through videos on Instagram and laughing at God knows what and complaining about how all these young kids have to do now is get up and dance in front of the screen, and then they get all this money. He's very confused by it.
It is stupid. It is stupid. But I am not on my phone that much, but you do. I will give you that credit. You do when you're with friends or family. You do put the phone away. I'll give you that. I just can't get into this franchise. I mean, there are plenty of Netflix shows that I think I'm going to like, and I watch a little bit of them, and I don't like them. This isn't the only franchise I don't like, but it's awful. God, I hate it.
I actually never watched them. I was scarred by it because in middle school, a boy said I looked like Schmeagol, so I never watched it because I was sad.
Wow. Well, and that's oddly enough, Schmeagol Gollum is the... That's who this movie is about, too. It sounds like this is going to be the working title right now, I believe, for the movie is Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum. So that seems to be like he'll be the center of all this. So Claudia, would be particularly triggering given your relationship with the franchise. I don't recommend you go here. It's not your fault. You don't look like Smeagol. We're all here to support you. And instead, we'll move away from past trauma, even though I am very excited for this movie. Love the Lord of the Rings franchise. Will be front and center when this happens. Claudia, let's get to that. Some news out of hockey as another early Leafs postseason exit leads to another coaching change in pro sports.
Yes, Sheldon Keefe fired after 5 seasons. You talked about it out in the first round against the Bruins, although it did go to 7. We saw the articles, we saw the headlines, but the one thing you should see if you haven't already is this video that he put out.
Leafs Nation, time has come to say goodbye. Writing down a note and sending it out didn't seem like enough, and I do plan on taking a little break from media, so here I am. I'm forever grateful for the opportunity to coach the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's a dream come true for a boy from Brampton. I didn't get it done in the playoffs. I didn't help push our team over the line and deliver. I accept responsibility for that. No excuses. That's the job. I didn't get it done. It's the reality of the business, and I accept it. Leafs Nation, you deserve your Stanley Cup. Your passion at home and on the road is unmatched. It's an incredible honor to coach the Maple Leafs.
And if you're not watching on DraftKings Network or YouTube, he's in the middle of the ocean, it looks like, guys. It looks like he took his boat out to the middle of the ocean, took a selfie video. I have to say, though, the video is sweet. He takes it on the head and he's just then jumps in the water. I'm kidding. He doesn't, but I don't know why he's in the middle of the ocean for this.
It is the most hockey guy video imaginable, though, Dad, because we talk all about players and coaches standing up and accepting responsibility, and firmly says, yeah, I get it. I didn't get this done in the postseason. And for a guy that had been in this organization on the AHL side for a while before he took over the big team in the NHL, has an appreciation for that area, clearly has an appreciation and understanding of what Leafs fans have been through. So I found that oddly comforting. And yeah, Claudia mentioned the background, super soothing. Great stuff.
Yeah, he's going fishing already. He's fine. He's all right.
I mean, first off, I love the fact he just took responsibility for 3 of the last 4 seasons out in the first round, even though it was a Game 7 overtime goal this time around by Boston to knock him out. I loved it. That's a guy who's got 2 more years left on his deal, so he can sit on that. If he was on a boat, if he was on a dock, whatever he was on, he can sit there on that boat, enjoy himself, love the birds playing in the background. Beautiful scene there for a man that's going to keep collecting paychecks. I loved it all. Took responsibility, saying, I know what needed to be done. I didn't do it. But you know what? As he said, I'm going to take a break from media, and I'd imagine there's going to be a whole lot of scenes where he just was right there. That was very cool.
Beautiful.
Hey, man, be rich and fired the right way. You mentioned being a fired professional coach with the kind of contracts going out now, one of the best gigs in sport. Happy trails. We wish him well. Claudia, let's get to the third.
Oh, no.
I don't know why you're even tossing to me because I don't know anything about this, but Taylor Swift's second leg of the tour in Paris after she released the album in between the breaks. GoJo, tell us more.
Yeah, no, this is an exciting one, guys. I figured you guys are both chomping at the bit to talk about this, so I'll try and say my piece and then get out of the way here quickly. But we kicked off the final leg of the Eras Tour back over in Europe, this night 1 in Paris. Taylor Swift back after a little hiatus in the middle of the tour. We had a new album added to the family, the Tortured Poets department. Bit of a tepid response at first, both critically and from fans, but seems to be growing on people. And my brothers and sisters in Christ, let me tell you, if you were on the fence before, this concert performance will be the thing that pushes you over into the loving arms of loving the Tortured Poets department. Added 6, albeit abbreviated, renditions of songs off the album, but Daddy, I Love Him, which we talked about on this show, had been somewhat of a rebuke of the fan base, so funny to see that in concert. Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, the performance A1, Fortnite, The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, the Matty Healy diss track with some nods to some 1975 concert footage mixed in there as well. I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, another one, an admission that she was depressed on tour during the first leg while we were all watching her, and yet goes up and performs the only, I would argue, bop on the album to absolute acclaim in the concert. Had a nice little intro here, very campy stuff that she built in to the design, the choreography, the costumes were A1. So High School, the song about Travis Kelce in there as well, with a little dance and a nod, I think, by Cam, her backup dancer, to one of Travis's touchdown dances in the middle of that. Down Bad got in. It might be now the best set on the tour. I know I've taken up a lot of time. Dad, I want to make sure you get to react to this one on here. I know you were watching the TikTok live stream just like me.
I wish you would take up about 40 more seconds so the show would be over so I wouldn't have to talk about it. Though I will ask, do you feel like you missed out? Because you went to 3 of her concerts. Now the concerts include the new song. So do you feel like you got a bit ripped off here by not getting those songs in?
Not ripped off, but it smells like opportunity. I'm glad you asked. I'm looking at flights. I'm looking at tickets. If anyone's going overseas and wants a weekend buddy over the summer, your boy might be in the market, because I thought after 3 shows in the U.S. I was out of the game. But seeing this over a grainy TikTok footage, buddy, I got to see it live. And if you want to see us live, you can try us here every Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Monday.